Hey, what's up, traders? Going, I had two, three, four, two, maybe three for five. I don't know. We'll get to it. Took a few trades on Shopify, but our first trade was here on LVS, and this one was pretty straightforward. It wasn't anything too crazy. You're going to see us go back to it here. It starts making a move up through 37. This was right at the bell. It wasn't too much volume, but we do the DC low button 73, just put it to an even number 75, just in case we did have to scale in, just makes it a little bit easier. And as you're going to see, um, I don't know what happened here. I thought I was hitting it. I mean, you can even see it here. I'm assuming DOS was just behind, but it's clearly, I hit the button when it said 37.48 by 37.54, and I got filled at 37.62. Now you can clearly see Hive Day is still here at 37.55. I don't know what happened here. I'm assuming DOS was just behind. I got lucky because I should have been filled between 48 and 54. However, I got filled at 62. But as you're going to see, the price does click up to it like a second or two later. And I'm basically like, oh, okay, charts are lagging a little bit, whatever. But I put the order out there down here around. I was originally going to be looking for the 37 test, but since I got an extra almost 20 cents out of it, I decided to just move it up. And especially because I started seeing a volume come up and I saw VWAP climbing really fast, and I was like, you know what? I'll just look for a little bit over half that move, not quite the 37 test, and just try to get out of this thing for a nice quick scalp. However, this thing kind of goes back and forth, and you're going to see it comes down, almost gets us a few times, and then decides to try to go higher. I'm ready to add up through 38 if it does get there. It never does quite get there. And at the same time, we decided to start Shopify here. As you can see, it made a move up through 29, running into a double top from the pre-market from yesterday, and just seemed like it was struggling. So that was why we went ahead and started this thing. And you can see it's really just kind of chilling here in the 20s. It's not really going any higher. So again, hit the button, we get filled at 18. As you can see, right after that, it did start to go a little bit higher. So LVS tried to go higher, starts to come back down, and then it does just kind of flush down and gives us the fill pretty much all at once. Finally gave us that move down through the $0.50 and came down and gave us a fill. So this one was a little frustrating because it did I mean, this thing came all the way down to like 36.70 or so. But it is what it is. I didn't like that we didn't get an ad. It tried to go higher. The volume wasn't that great. And there's no way to predict that this thing's just going to kind of die the way that it did. So anyways, back over to Shopify, you're going to see this thing kind of starts to turn into a bit of a grinder. After, I actually think it wasn't too bad up until this point. We get a nice move. Ask it and hit, ask it and hit, ask it and hit, goes up through 50, keeps going. And basically I'm just waiting for that jiggle after it went through that key area. You can see it's still going 60. And then right there, it started to stop. And even then it didn't really like stop. But right here, you can see it's starting to jiggle. I kind of just assumed the jiggle because it was going pretty straight up until then. I didn't want to miss like a quick flush. So I did prematurely kind of get into that, but it did end up giving us an actual jiggle here. And so I would have gotten in at the same spot anyway. But what you're going to see is this decides to try to work its way a little bit higher. And we decide that we're going to turn this into a 1-2, especially, and this is mainly because of where our average is. So I see that our average is below the $0.50. I know that on something like this, where it tends to make a big move up through there, if this was our first entry, what would we be looking for? We'd be looking for that $0.50 retest. So if I'm not above the $0.50 with my average, the odds are I'm going to not be in a trade that I really like, especially because, again, this early in the day, you'll notice that VWAP tends to catch up a lot quicker because that's where all the volume is to begin. So if the price is going up and the volume's increasing, VWAP's going to catch up to it real fast, right? Volume weighted average, it's just the average. So it's going to catch it pretty fast if more volume's coming in and the price is going higher. So I don't like that because when stocks tend to come back down and have some sort of a bounce area, VWAP is a very common bounce area. So always want to have your average up above that. And then you start looking for those key areas. And I knew that I wanted my average up above the $0.50. So basically just waited to where I thought we could possibly get a good ad. I was essentially seeing if this wanted to keep going before I got my ad, but it was really struggling there. Got the ad, started to come back down, and we hit it. So it brings our average up to 29.52, gives us 450 shares. Up at the top there, I think we were down like 118 max. When we got the ad, we were down like 108 bucks. You're going to see it start to come down. And this is kind of where it starts to get a little iffy, right? Because again, Had this been our first 2 entries and our average is way up here around 70, we're looking to take profits as this thing bounces off of 50. But now we're in a peculiar situation because our average is at 29.52. So it kind of puts us in a tough spot because you have to be a little bit more patient. And it kind of sucks because, all because of that first entry and you let it go against you, it kind of puts you in a spot where you have to be a lot more patient. So as you're going to see, it does eventually come down, gives us the $0.50 retest, and it's going to flush through and actually give us our fill for the majority of our shares here at 46, which is nice. It's coming down, coming down. Actually, I think, I took half off here. Yeah, this isn't the one where it comes down and fills us. So I realized it wasn't coming down and hitting our 46, which you can see it looked like 45 flash there, 46 again. So I'm not sure if we would have got filled the shares there, but instead of taking off, I think like 75% at 46, I took half off just in case it wanted to pop back up through the $0.50. So that way we're not riding our full shares back up. As you can see, it does try to do that here after it did come down and try to test 40 there for a little bit. We took a little bit more off. So we had 450 shares. We're down to 100. And this is kind of where I feel like I made the mistake because I didn't really love my average, but in the back of my head, I'm thinking if we can get that 29 retest and I have 100 shares, we're looking pretty good because I only had 50 shares out here. Or actually, I did put the 100 out there just looking for the flush, I think. But I do eventually, I was going to change that. So as it comes back up, it makes a pretty quick move. And I believe I scroll in here so we can see it a little bit better. But I told myself there still hasn't been like a real pullback, right? And like consecutive red candles. So this thing is still strong. It's still making its move up on the front side. I'd be okay if it wants to go higher and we can get our average up a little bit higher and some more size. So that's exactly what it does. It goes back to the highs. I was hoping it would go up through 30. It stalled at 29.95. We end up getting an add back up to 200 shares. Remember, we started this with 150. So this is essentially almost kind of a starter, but now our average is way up here at 29.70. So that's pretty good considering we could come down, retest the $0.50 again. VWAP's still way down here. The moving average is still way down here as well. And we're just going to kind of watch this thing go. However, you're going to see this one doesn't really cooperate too well, and it just kind of hangs out up here. So I had told myself live on stream, if you want to go watch that, and it's going to, obviously the streams, they come down after I post these videos. So if you want to watch them, all you got to do is hit the join button down below. The mid-level stream, you'll see it include, or the mid-level membership, it includes all my live streams. So you can go back and watch any of these. So you can watch these in real time. But I had said that I'm going to, if this goes high of day, I'm going to cut the half that I added up here. I'm going to take those off for a loss, and then I'm going to see what it does up through 30 and then add those back. So you're going to see that's essentially what happens. It goes up through 30. I cut that half. I realized, and there's how I scrolled in. I realized that it wasn't going any higher because if you noticed, every time it went higher, it would go up like 20, 30 cents. So when I realized that it only went up to 30.09, I was okay adding back in, thinking that that was just, a test through 30. It didn't really go anywhere. This is probably going to come back down. So I added those shares back. As you can see, we did end up with some realized loss. We were down about $40, or actually I think it had to be like $50, maybe because we were up like 12. But anyways, we get those back. Our average comes up to 29.86. So now we have 200 shares, looking for this to come back down and give us that retest. So this is the one where it does come down. It goes through, gives us the nice fill. And we took off 75% there, leaving us with 50 shares. But now we're back green, and we do have some unrealized as well. Basically, as it's coming down, I realize it's probably going to bounce off the $0.50, take another half off. And essentially, I'm not going to let these go back up through the highs. Just going to let those cut me off at break even if it wants to. And that's eventually what it does. I put a trail on at break even. It went a little bit lower to bring my trail down a little bit. But this thing ends up going all the way back to the highs anyway. So if we come over to it real quick, I can show you. Shop. So what happened after that, you can see this is where we got out those last shares. It did try to go higher, came back down, bounced off VWAP again. And at this point, I'm still telling myself this hasn't had a real pullback, right? Just red candle back up, red candle back up. And so I'm looking for that actual pullback. And so we got another nice move up through that high of day again. And I tried to jump in looking just for the retest of that area. But as you can see, it did come down to 25, but that's as low as it got. We got in pretty decent here. The high was 38. We got in at 34, but we actually ended up taking a penny loss on this on 100 shares, which obviously is break even anyway. But it's pretty frustrating. It didn't really give us any kind of a pullback after that. I was looking for just the retest of that, but that's how strong this thing was. Again, though, still no actual pullback. So when we got up here, it really started to run into some resistance here at 70, 70, 71, 71. And then it finally broke through. But I actually had got in right before that because it failed it again and it looked like we were going to break down. So I took some shares, and when it did actually break up through again, I was like, all right, I'm going to add. If it doesn't work right away, I'm going to cut it. So that's what I did. I ended up cutting it there, and then I realized it was a fake out, added it back, and then I scaled out the remaining shares there. So just so frustrating. I actually tried to, so I was down to some leftover shares here. I tried to add to that, assuming this was going to be like a little bounce off of this area here, kind of forming like a head and shoulders. But that didn't happen. And eventually it did, where it did finally come down to 30. But this thing has just been kind of a pain until over here where it finally kind of broke down. It just kept getting held up. And as you can see, it did try to go back to the highs again. It was just a very frustrating ticker to trade. Would have been a pretty good trade had we just, got this pullback here, even though all the hassle we would have had to go through to get there. But pretty frustrating overall. We'll take, the green day, but it's just, when you have a ticker like SHOP, it kind of demoralizes you a bit and you just got to move on from it. So don't forget to like and subscribe. Always appreciate the support. If you do have any questions or comments, feel free to leave those down below. You can find me in Discord or over on Twitter. Want to say anything? Say bye. Say peace. Say it to the camera. Hold your fingers up and go. Move 'em over here.